He's also a co-editor of the Perspectives on the Black Intellectual Tradition. And he is joining us for the second time. The book that he is going to be talking about today is Black Freethinkers. All right, this is the book here, and some of you all will find that in the link. Just remember, I just wanted to read a quote before I introduce him and have him take over. He says, I think the primary reason that Black freethinkers have been ignored is the politics of respectability prevalent among scholars in African American history. This field began in the mid-19th century as a way to highlight the achievements, patriotism, and contributions of African Americans to the nation. Black history was, and sometimes still is, a political project aimed at making an argument for racial equality. If African Americans could be presented in a positive light, so thinking went, they would be given equal rights. Thus, many scholars tended to dismiss, downplay, or ignore anything that presented the race negatively. And so with that, we're going to turn it over to Dr. Cameron, who's going to give us a little bit more into this history of Black freethinkers, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the first part of the book. Thank you so much for joining us once again, Dr. Cameron.
Yeah, thank you for that generous introduction and for the wonderful work that you do with Black Nonbelievers DC. I'm really happy to be here with you all again. For the first talk in this series, I primarily focus on the fourth chapter of Black Freethinkers, and I talked about the intersections between secularism and the civil rights and Black power movements of the 1960s and early 1970s. I'll talk about that a little bit towards the tail end, but I'll focus on it quite a bit less than I did that day, so I can give you more of a general overview of the long history of Black free thought spanning about 175 years from the early 19th century up through the Black Power movement in the 1970s. I became interested in this project about 8 years ago in 2012. For me, this was sort of a personal and a professional project. So I am a free thinker myself. I am an atheist, and I have been for about 10 years. And probably about a couple of years into my journey as an atheist, you know, it was fairly isolating. That I didn't know a lot of other Black atheists or agnostics. So I found myself sort of trying to search for a sense of community and to search for some like-minded people and connect with them on Facebook and Twitter and whatnot. And in that sort of search for a Black free thought community, you know, I started to come across Black Nonbelievers, which had been fairly recently created at that point. But I also came across sort of random blog posts, YouTube videos, things like that on individual Black thinkers. So a lot of the people that kind of show up in my book, I would find, you know, a 1,500 word blog post on one of them, right? Hubert Harrison, for example. So I saw that there was some information out there, and I started to get a sense when I really did some digging that you know, this history was much more widespread. This phenomenon of Black free thought was much more widespread than historical scholarship on African American religion and African American intellectual history would have us believe, right? I read deeply in the history of Black religion for my first book, which focused on sort of the intersections of Puritanism and Black abolitionist thought in the 18th and 19th centuries. So I was really familiar with works, especially in early America, on African American religion, yet I come across really no mention of atheism or agnosticism among slaves or free blacks in America, and very little mention of those groups in the 20th century. Even though I was finding they were becoming increasingly widespread during that 20th century. Now, in the quotation that Ro just read, he noted that, one of my one of the things that I found is that among scholars who do African American history, I think this politics of respectability has certainly been one of the factors that's led to sort of an ignoring of the history of Black free thought, at least among scholars, right? But I think there are some other reasons as well, and one is this notion that this long-standing notion, not just among Black scholars, but really among Americans in general, that African Americans are naturally religious, right? That the Black church has always been at the center of the Black community, that it's the most important institution in the community. And it's a belief that, in the course of researching this book, I found has its roots in the 19th century abolitionist movement. So in his very influential 1835 book entitled Slavery, the Unitarian minister William Ellery Channing noted of Southern slaves that of all the races of men, the African is the mildest and most susceptible of attachment. He loves where the European would hate. He watches the life of a master whom the North American Indian in like circumstances would stab to the heart. The African is affectionate. And the primary reason for this supposedly loving and affectionate nature of African Americans, in Channing's view, was that he said, quote, the colored race are said to be peculiarly susceptible of the religious sentiment. Now, a scholar of Black religion named Curtis Evans notes in his book, The Burden of Black Religion, that both abolitionists in the 19th century and pro-slavery thinkers alike appropriated Channing's argument about sort of the primacy of Black religiosity. And this reasoning really reinforced this 19th century view that Blacks are naturally religious, and continue to influence perceptions of African American religiosity since that time. And again, whether we're looking at articles by white free thinkers like Eugene MacDonald in The Truth Seeker, whether we're looking at testimony in the U.S. Congress in the 1950s before the House Un-American Activities Committee, whether we're looking in Black popular culture or just American popular culture more broadly, we see this idea again and again coming up of African Americans being overly religious or being naturally religious. And it's something that I think has caused people to not even consider that there might be a long and vibrant tradition of African American free thought. Now, I can't go too into that tradition in the next 35 minutes or so, but I'll try to give you a good sort of overview of the key themes in the history of Black free thought from the early 19th century up through the civil rights movement. So let's start with the origins. I found while I was doing research, especially in slave narratives, in travel accounts to the South, in newspapers from Black activists and abolitionists like Frederick Douglass, as well as just free thought papers like The Truth Seeker. I found in the course of this research that African American free thought arose in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. And we see in these origins a key distinction right from the start, a key distinction between Black and white freethinkers. So if we're looking at the ideology of really well-known white freethinkers like Thomas Paine, right, in
So she
the
got up in there.
1790s, or Robert Owen and Francis Wright in the 1820s and 1830s. We can sort of trace their anti-religiosity to Enlightenment philosophy, to Enlightenment science. Some were kind of religious liberals and then moved a bit more on the spectrum toward.
We're listening to this is a YouTube channel called Black Non-Believers, and this is a section on black freethinkers, and this guy is called, his name is Chris Cameron. So y'all know I listen to a lot of talks and discussions from atheists because that's more along the lines that I formulate my ideas and concepts. But I've noticed this. There's not a lot of black atheists. It seems like black people just hold on to their religion harder than other people, yo. And don't really question that shit, yo. Even though it was given to us by, even though the religion was given to us by our slave masters, motherfuckers just still love that shit. Eat that shit the fuck up, yo. So I always wonder, why do black people gravitate towards religion more so than other ethnic groups, and even still can't really use the religion to build a community. You know what I'm saying? It's the weirdest shit. Like riding through New York the other day, you know, we rode down Canal Street, and for like 3 blocks, everything written in whatever, if it's Chinese, Japanese, Cantonese, I don't know. It's all Asian language, all on the storefronts, all on the buildings, all on the stands, all on the shops. And the group of people you see for those 3 blocks are 99.9% Asian. Like they dominate their community. And, you know, whatever religion they are, that shit comes second, yo. And then you drive a few more blocks down, and then you get into the Hasidic Jew community, and you see all their shops and storefronts and businesses, and then the people for 3 or 4 blocks, they're all Jews with the black hats and the little tassel hair coming down with the black coats and shit, and this is their fucking hood. This is their community. They own all the houses, businesses, buildings. They own all that shit. And their religion comes second to their community, or at least they use their religion to build a community. Like blacks don't do that shit, yo. People that worship the God of love will kill you. Yes, they will, bro. They will kill you in the name of their God. They will kill you in the name of their God for you being a heretic or a blasphemer or a non-believer or a fucking whatever, yo. But once again, yo, black people love their fucking churches and they God and they Jesus. But then when you roll through a neighborhood where 3 or 4 blocks, the only demographics that you see is mostly predominantly black people. You won't see a lot of black storefronts and businesses and shops and home ownership like you see with other ethnic groups. I say we focus on the wrong shit too fucking much and put our time and effort into the wrong shit for so long, yo. Other motherfuckers, yeah, they got religions and believe in their gods or whatever, but they got communities and neighborhoods too, yo. And that's another thing that somebody said, yo. Even if it is a predominantly black neighborhood, it's still a white neighborhood. Like black people live in white neighborhoods. Like you don't own the property. You don't own any of these houses or any of these businesses in this neighborhood. You're renting your house are renting your apartment from a white person. This is a white owned neighborhood. You just live in it. Like, black people don't really have their own neighborhood. You don't own this shit. You still live in a white man's neighborhood. I think the sooner we can get away from religion, the sooner we'll start focusing on the factors that we need to implement to actually solve our real problems. Believing in God and having our souls saved and salvation and all that shit, that's not our biggest problem right now.
Theism and secularism. But generally, we're looking at, for white free thinkers, the origins of that movement being in religious liberalism and Enlightenment science. But black free thought grew pretty directly out of the institution of slavery and the conditions that blacks endured within it, right? So on a day-to-day basis, African Americans embraced free thought because of a sort of inability to resolve the problem of evil, which is sort of incredibly prevalent throughout their daily lives, right? These are people who are witnessing savage beatings and whippings. They're witnessing people being sexually assaulted. They're witnessing their family members, or they're experiencing themselves being sold away at a whim, right? Because their master lost a card game or something like that. And so the idea starts to arise that there cannot be a just and
Wow, Dr. Howard Johnson. He's at Harriet Tubman's grave, I guess. Harriet Tubman Davis. I met the guy in person one time, yo. But that gravestone says Harriet Tubman Davis on it.
This is the Prince of Pan-Africanism. This is Intercontinental Ifa Tunde. This is Black Thanos. This is the notorious RBG. This is the Prince of Pan-Africanism live at the grave of the greatest woman to ever walk American soil, the greatest female revolutionary of the 19th century. One of the greatest soldiers for freedom and justice in the history of the world. Her name is Queen Mother Harriet Tubman, born approximately 1820, left this world for the next world on March the 10th of 1913. A bold black woman who caught a serious disease as a child, but she didn't give up. Got hit in the head with a weight as a child, but she didn't give up. Slave master said she wasn't worth 6 pence, but she wouldn't give up. Escaped from slavery, went back, helped her mother and her father, went back, helped her brothers and sisters, went back, and helped over 300 Africans who she didn't even know along the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad existed before Harriet Tubman, but she would reinvent the Underground Railroad. Brothers and sisters, this black woman who fought for the rights of black women.
Americans can see Bigfoot, UFOs, and even Jesus in a dog's ass, but can't see a corporate oligarchy forming for the past 60 years. That's funny. I dropped that painting off in New York. She was excited. Illinois expunges records of nearly 5,000 marijuana cases. Landslide hits residential area in Norway. Painting I'm working on. Just the shit. Trying to see if anybody's talking about like some new shit in the news. I get most of my news off of Facebook. Um, mm, Empire State Trail is complete. Now you can bike or hike from New York to Buffalo. Not a whole lot in the news. Oh well. What time is it? It's 1. A little bit after 1 o'clock. Oh shit. Hope everybody feeling good. You know what I'm saying? Relaxing. What's today? Monday? Yeah. So next Monday I go back to my doctor. I might go back to work next week or the week after. Shit crazy. I've been out of work for 12 weeks. 13 weeks, yo. And I've gotten lazy and accustomed to just being home all day. I swear, I kind of miss working. I don't know, just to have a reason to leave the house and do shit. And I like my job, yo. I got an alright job. But I think I could go another few weeks without work. You know? And I would be okay with that. I would be totally fine with that. But you gotta do what you gotta do, man. If my doctor say I can go back, then I'll be back to work.
Benevolent and all-knowing God who actually loves me and cares about my interests. If there was, then I would not be stuck in this hell of slavery in the United States, right? Slave narratives became especially important for my research. For decades, historians have been using these narratives to document multiple aspects of the Black religious experience. But I found in reading for this probably 15 to 20 or more autobiographies of slaves and formerly enslaved people, I found that these narratives also speak to the presence of atheism within 19th century slaves. So one formerly enslaved man, Austin Stewart, for example, immediately after discussing a brutal whipping that his master administered on his sister on a Sabbath morning, he asked in his narrative, "Can anyone wonder that I and other slaves often doubted the sincerity of every white man's religion? Can it be a matter of astonishment that slaves feel that there is no just God, but So this is a theme that comes up again and again in both slave narratives and the accounts of travelers to the South. People like Daniel Payne, who would later in the 19th century become a bishop in the AME Church, but in the 1830s, 1840s, he was a teacher and just sort of a regular minister traveling to the South and observing conditions on plantations. And this theme keeps coming up again and again, where you see slaves who are experiencing these brutal punishments, and this is causing them to question the idea of God. And this is sort of helping to spread atheism and secularism on these 19th century plantations. Another key development that sort of fostered the growth of African American atheism was the rise of pro-slavery religion. These are just sort of religious justifications and theological justifications for the institution of slavery. And this is something that would become more of a coherent body of thought among Southern intellectuals and among Southern slaveholders after the 1830s. And it sort of arose and grew strength in large part because of the growing strength of the abolitionist movement in the 1820s and the 1830s, right? So early in the 1830s, on January 1st, 1831, William Lloyd Garrison began to publish his Liberator magazine, a publication that would put out
William Lloyd Garrison. I think I read about him before.
4 years until slavery was abolished in 1865. A couple of years later, the American Anti-Slavery Society was formed in Boston in 1833. We start to see a great sort of flowering institutionally of the abolitionist movement, a proliferation of anti-slavery publications, more people traveling around the country, giving speeches, attacking slavery, writing more books, putting together more petitions. So Southern slaveholders start to feel that their institution is under attack, right? And religious and theological justifications for slavery, right? Drawing off things like the Curse of Ham and other biblical texts. These really start to gain strength in the 1830s and 1840s, as well as the type of preaching that is trying to sort of introduce slaves to God, but at the same time keep them in their place as bondmen and bondwomen in this world, right? So the type of preaching where, slaves are going to church and...
All right, guys, I am working on the commission, so I'll probably do... So normally I do more talking than painting, but until this painting is well underway, I need to do more painting than talking, since, like I say, this is a paid commission, and my client has already submitted her the deposit, which is why I'm working on it. So yeah, while I'm in the studio, I really just gonna go ahead and kind of focus on this and really work my way through this piece right now. So we're still dealing with the skin tones. As you can see, there's two faces in here, an elderly woman and a baby, and you can see their face and their hands. That's about as much skin tone which is showing on this one. So the elderly lady, I've filled in her face and her upper chest. So like I said, I just want to work on the hands and get the baby's face blocked in, and then we'll start blocking in the articles of clothing and then blocking the background. But once again, like I said, this is a paid commission, so I don't want to just sit in the studio and not lollygag around or whatever, but I do want to be like more productive as far as having actual brushwork done. Because you guys already know, bro, I'll sit in here for 2 hours and just talk and won't paint a damn thing. And then after 2 hours of talking, I'll paint for 40 minutes. And I don't have a problem with that at all. I don't. It's, when I'm working on my own, when I have my own pieces, I don't mind talking more than painting. I can paint anytime I feel like it. But with this, when it comes to these commissions, I just rather, you know, like, be on the ball with it. So we're definitely gonna try to get as much more of this done as we can. Let's position this canvas. I want to raise it up, so I'm probably. All right. Raise that up. All right. And let's get to it.
Have a sort of service for them, and they're not necessarily learning all of the kind of theological and religious lessons that their white counterparts would have learned, right? They're going to church and being preached to, and the minister's telling them, don't steal, don't lie, don't cheat. So they're basically getting messages that are trying to sort of use religion to strengthen the institution of slavery. So that type of preaching, as well as the increasing proliferation of pro-slavery religion, becomes another sort of key justification and a key factor in helping to spread atheism among 19th century slave communities. Now, aside from the freethinker Frederick Douglass, what we usually see during the era of slavery among many blacks was not necessarily the type of secular humanism that would be characteristic of white freethinkers, but rather just kind of strict atheism or agnosticism. And you know, they were skeptics regarding the existence of God, but because of their positionality as enslaved people, they didn't necessarily have the means to try to help improve the lives of other people. But when we do see some of these individuals like William Wells Brown and Frederick Douglass that are religious skeptics, when we do see them gaining their freedom, they're certainly very active in abolitionist, women's rights, and other kind of political and social causes.
Frederick Douglass wound up marrying a white lady too.
So the first chapter of the book talks about these sort of origins during the 19th century, and from there I move into talking about the era of the Harlem Renaissance, also known as the New Negro Renaissance. And this is where we see sort of a great flowering of Black free thought. And we start to see free thought develop quite a bit. One of the key differences that we see in the 1920s up through the 1940s is that rather than having somebody who wrote a slave narrative comment on other slaves who were atheists or agnostics, right? Partially as an argument for why we shouldn't have slavery in the country. During the Harlem Renaissance, you start to see freethinkers, Black freethinkers, that are using their own work to articulate their own ideas rather than just sort of commenting and pointing out the irreligiosity of other Black freethinkers. Now, the Harlem Renaissance was a cultural and intellectual movement that arose in the late 19-teens and early 1920s. And it had its developments, it had its sort of origins in other developments, especially the Great Migration from the South, which saw roughly 1.5 million Black Southerners migrate to the urban North from 1914 up through the end of the 1920s, right? They're moving north, trying to escape racism in the South, but also moving for greater economic opportunities, right? During World War I, a lot of white workers are going into the army and serving in Europe. So blacks are coming from the South to take place in factories in Chicago and Detroit and New York City and whatnot. And you also see after the end of World War I, a sort of staunch racial backlash from whites throughout the United States. This is a period, especially that the sort of infamous Red Summer of 1919. This is a period that saw a massive increase in number of race riots throughout the United States. You would see black soldiers who had served in Europe in World War I, who had served in part because they thought this would be making an argument for citizenship and for equality when they returned back home, right? If they went to sort of fight to make the world safe for democracy. They're coming back and they're being attacked in their military uniforms when they arrive at train stations all throughout the country, right? Now, what this backlash does is it doesn't completely do away with sort of traditional political activity and political organizing, but it does cause a number of activists and intellectuals to look for different ways of helping to bring about racial equality in the United States. And so you had some folks like Charles Johnson, you had some folks like W.E.B. Du Bois, and others pushing for more kind of cultural approaches to solving racism, right? And arguing that that African Americans can sort of prove their equality, prove their fitness for American citizenship by writing great poetry, by writing the next great American novel, through the theater, right, through artwork, and things like this. So the Great Migration of Black Southerners to the North, as well as the sort of racist backlash that we see during the Red Summer of 1919, would help to sort of inaugurate the Harlem Renaissance, one of the sort of greatest flowerings of African American literary and cultural life that we've seen in the United States. And what I found is, I was initially introduced to some of the secular leanings of some of these Renaissance writers back, 8 years ago when I was first reading through some blogs and watching short presentations that I found online. And so after I'd seen, a couple of references to Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston being free thinkers, I basically just started to read everything that I could from Harlem Renaissance writers. And what I found is that quite a few of them were actually free thinkers, including Alain Locke, the man widely known as the father of the Harlem Renaissance, James Weldon Johnson, right, author of the Black National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing, Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, Nella Larson, the poet Claude McKay, and others. Free thought and secular themes are really rife throughout a lot of the sort of literary productions of these writers. Nella Larson is particularly intriguing to me because her work really kind of helped to inaugurate the ties between feminism and free thought, especially her novel Quicksand, which she published in 1928. That novel focuses on Helga Crane, who was widely at the time believed to be modeled off of Larson herself. In the novel, right from the start, it opens up articulating Helga Crane's dissatisfaction with American Christianity, with religion in general, right? In the first couple of pages of the novel, Helga, who is a teacher at a school called Naxos, an anagram of Saxon, down south. This is a black school that's basically a composite of two schools that Larson herself attended, Fisk University and Tuskegee University. So Naxos is supposed to be sort of representative of one of these southern HBCUs, right? And in the opening pages of the book, Helga Crane is having to go along with other teachers and students to the school chapel, where she has to listen to a sermon from a traveling white minister, right? And the minister is basically saying, you Naxos Negroes, you are better than other blacks throughout the country, right? And it's because you guys are not sort of agitating things politically, right? You're not trying to sort of rile up race relations and things like that. You blacks at Naxos, you know your place. That's why I like you guys, right? So Helga Crane is really mortified, and she would end up leaving Naxos fairly soon. She would travel to Chicago, which is actually where Larson herself grew up. And she's a newcomer in Chicago, so she thinks, all right, well, I'll be able to meet some people at this black church. I think it was like a Presbyterian or Black Methodist church, something like that. She thought she'd be able to meet some people, maybe get some help finding a job, whatnot. And she was basically snubbed, right? So in the first couple of chapters, right, she's gotten this patronizing sermon from a white minister. She cannot find any sense of community among black Christians in Chicago. And then later on in the book, after a number of different experiences, traveling to Europe, coming back to Harlem, where a lot of folks from the South were migrating during this Great Migration, she would end up making a really rash decision in sort of a moment where she was spurned by a former lover. She had like stumbled on accident into this storefront church in Harlem. She would make a rash decision to marry a revival preacher named Reverend Mr. Pleasant Green. Moved down to Alabama, and within 3 years she had 4 children, 1 kid, a set of twins. And then after the 4th children, she's basically sitting there on her deathbed. And she realized that she had completely ruined her life in converting to Christianity, in marrying the Reverend, right? Because these were seen as, this is just what you do, right? You convert, you become a Christian, you get married, you have kids, you live this sort of normal or heteronormal life. And she's sitting in bed after having this 4th child, not knowing whether she's even going to live. And Larson writes of Helga, with the obscuring curtain of religion rent, she was able to look about her and see with shocked eyes this thing she had done to herself. She couldn't even blame God for it now that she knew he didn't exist, right? So because of her experiences in marrying the Reverend, she eventually came to disbelieve in God, right? She had been very skeptical in the earlier part of the novel. Now she becomes an atheist towards the end, and she really rejects the sort of normative family structures. She rejects the influence of patriarchy in black communities, and she really kind of ties in religion with patriarchy as something that is oppressing women, right? That is causing her to sort of sink into this quicksand, right? So I say she kind of inaugurated the ties between feminism and free thought, in that by sort of linking religion with patriarchy, with heteronormativity, she's saying this is something that oppresses women, and for women to have true equality in this country, they need to sort of slough off belief in God. We see similar themes in the work of Zora Neale Hurston, right, in some of her anthropological work, as well as, ironically enough, Their Eyes Were Watching God, right, which is also sort of a kind of a feminist novel. I was most interested in doing my research on Hurston in her autobiography, Dust Tracks on a Road, which she published in 1943. And probably more than any other Harlem Renaissance thinker, she really kind of clearly lays out her problems with religion. Now, Hurston had grown up in Eatonville, Florida. She was the daughter of a Baptist minister in Eatonville. So, you know, she grew up because she found that comes up is that some people are really hesitant to be open about their religious beliefs while they're young or while they're in their sort of smaller southern communities. And this is one of the reasons why the Harlem Renaissance becomes such a formative moment in the history of black free thought. Because you have people like Zora Neale Hurston, who had grown up in Eatonville, couldn't really be as open about her beliefs there. You have folks like Langston Hughes growing up in Joplin, Missouri, same situation, right? He comes to disbelieve in God around 13, 14 years old, but it's not something that he can really be open and vocal about where he is in a small community out in Joplin. But when all of these intellectuals and creative types, artists and writers, when they're finally coming together in Harlem in the early 1920s, and you know, they're going to Columbia University like Langston Hughes did and Zora Neale Hurston did. They're taking classes from freethinkers like Franz Boas, with whom Hurston worked in her anthropology degree. And they're now able to be more open and more vocal about their religious skepticism, right? I came across some evidence while doing research on A. Philip Randolph, a sort of socialist freethinker, that while most blacks in Harlem were going to church on Sunday morning, a lot of black freethinkers would gather in A. Philip Randolph's room, and they would sort of date and talk about politics and economics and their problems with theology and their issues with the church, and how to sort of build a vibrant socialist and labor movement during the early 1920s. So it was sort of like an anti-church gathering in A. Philip Randolph's living room every Sunday morning through the afternoon. But they're now able to sort of build community and be with each other and share some of their ideas and refine some of their ideas. So free thought secularism would become pretty widespread throughout writers and thinkers of the Harlem Renaissance. But at the same time, you had a number of black radical thinkers who were not afraid of engaging in sort of traditional overt politics, who didn't really care about the white backlash, who really embraced kind of traditional and even more radical political opportunities during the 19-teens up through the 1930s. So the third chapter of the book focuses on the ties between black free thought and black socialists and communists during roughly a 25-year stretch from 1910 through 1935. There are a number of prominent sort of black communist intellectuals and activists during this time period. Louise Thompson Patterson was one. She was married to a prominent black lawyer named William Patterson. He was a lawyer for the NAACP. Hubert Harrison was sort of a towering black intellectual of this time period. Harry Haywood was sort of the leading black communist in the sort of mid 1920s on. He was likewise a black freethinker, as were some names that are probably more familiar to a lot of people, like W.E.B. Du Bois, as well as Richard Wright. Now, the socialists and communists were appealing to black intellectuals and to black political activists for a number of reasons, right? At least ideologically, they downplayed issues of race in favor of economics, right? So as long as you were a part of the working class, at least in theory, then you could be a part of these movements. Whereas you would see the Democratic and Republican parties specifically trying to sort of speak to racial issues and to sort of animate racial divisions and tensions in order to gain more adherents and to win office, right? Socialists and communists kind of downplayed those. Communists as well seem to sort of show up more for African Americans. So, for example, when the Scottsboro Boys in 1932, this is a group of 9 young African American men who were falsely accused of raping a white woman, and they were arrested and put on trial. The Communist Party was right there, sort of front and center, helping to fund their legal defense, helping to send their mothers and parents on speaking tours to sort of drum up funds for their defense as well. So these sort of political ideologies became increasingly appealing to African Americans, and also socialists and communists were generally non-religious or even actively anti-religious, right? So in 1926, the Communist International, which was sort of like the governing body for world communism, put out a directive that said, we expect communists around the world to be atheists. And it was really the case that at most communist meetings, at least in the northern United States, They were highly critical of religion. If you were known to be a church goer or a church member, you could face discipline or expulsion from the Communist Party. So for individuals who may have been religious skeptics before becoming socialist or communist, you can see why these parties would have been attractive to them in their sort of anti-religiosity. And then for some, it was sort of the other way around, where they sort of joined up with socialists and communists for kind of political reasons and economic reasons, and then kind of adopted the secular perspective of those parties. Socialism and communism would really sort of go hand in hand with secularism, right? And socialists and communists, like especially Hubert Harrison and Louise Thompson Patterson, would be highly critical of the ties between capitalism and Christianity. This is sort of a key theme that we see in the speeches and in the writings of Black communist freethinkers, right? That capitalism and Christianity work hand in hand to oppress Black people, not only in the United States, but throughout the globe, right? A lot of prominent Black communist and socialist freethinkers were not homegrown African Americans. Many migrated from the Caribbean, for example. Hubert Harrison was one of those. W.A. Domingo was another one. Richard B. Moore was a really prominent Black socialist and freethinker who had likewise migrated from the Caribbean. So they're sort of expanding their critique beyond African Americans and showing how capitalism and Christianity work to not only oppress Blacks within the United States, but are also sort of the twin evils that are helping to reinforce the oppression of Black people in the Caribbean and throughout Africa, right? They argued that capitalism and Christianity really played a central role in colonialism by European nations within or on the African continent. So that third chapter really looks, like I said, at this period from the 19-teens up through the 1930s and the early 1940s, ending with some of the work of W.E.B. Du Bois, who over his long life would go from being a socialist probably from the 1890s up through the 1930s or so, and then he sort of moved more towards communism from the 1930s towards the end of his life. So we see Du Bois kind of growing increasingly radical over the course of his life, and for him, like Hubert Harrison and other Black socialist and communist thinkers, he sort of made the same critique, both in the pages of The Crisis, which was the magazine of the NAACP that he edited, as well as his autobiography and even unpublished letters. He would make these same critiques that he thought capitalism and Christianity were sort of the two main reasons why African Americans and African peoples more broadly remained oppressed throughout the globe. And so I'll end for my last 10 minutes or so talking about what I really focused on quite a bit more in that first talk, namely Black free thought during the Civil Rights era. Now, the Civil Rights movement of the 50s and 60s is often portrayed as a religious movement. And that portrayal has its grounding in a lot of truth, right? It certainly is the case that churches were important meeting spaces for activists. It's certainly the case that Black religious figures were sort of front and center in a lot of civil rights protests. But that doesn't mean that it was exclusively a religious movement or even overwhelmingly a religious movement. And I think when we kind of combine the civil rights and Black power movements into one sort of overall Black freedom struggle, we can actually see the influence of secularism to a much greater extent than scholars and even popular culture has led us to believe. So one of the key civil rights organizations that emerged in 1961 was the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And, like the NAACP or the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SNCC sort of initially was led by Christian activists such as John Lewis, who were highly committed to the philosophy of nonviolence. But really, within a couple of years, the philosophy and approach of SNCC would start to change. And this is especially the case after James Forman and Stokely Carmichael rose to prominence within SNCC. So Forman had grown up in rural Mississippi. He served time in the military. He attended college in Chicago. He had had sort of a dramatic kind of anti-conversion experience when he was 12 years old. And this is another theme that we see kind of recurring throughout the writings of Black freethinkers, especially Richard Wright, James Baldwin, and Langston Hughes. So he writes in his autobiography, The Making of Black Revolutionaries, that when he was 12 years old, he was visiting his grandmother, attending her Baptist church, and there was a revival service right there. He's up on the mourner's bench with some of the other some of his young friends, and his friends shouted out that they had gotten religion, right? Older people shouted out that they had gotten religion too. And he writes that at the age of 12, I didn't have the courage to tell my grandmother that I thought this was all nonsense. So he looked around, he saw what was happening, he saw like what people were doing when they were saying they were converted. And he said, I too could fabricate some tears in this emotionally charged atmosphere. So I covered my face with my handkerchief and cried, Lord, have mercy. It worked. I was taken off the mourner's bench, and the people talked of how many children got saved that day by the grace of the Lord. Now, he kind of highlights this moment as foundational in his non-belief, whereas, of course, it was supposed to be the moment where he accepted Jesus into his heart and became a born-again Christian. And his atheist perspectives would develop after studying philosophy at Wilson Junior College in Chicago, and he would bring this secular perspective to his civil rights activity. He became the executive secretary of SNCC in 1963 and would ground his activism in secular humanism, largely because he believed that Christianity was a prime reason that African Americans were in a subordinate position in the United States. And he writes very clearly in his autobiography that he feels religion has hurt his people, right? He feels that Black religion especially was too otherworldly, and that it caused people to look to God to solve problems and not necessarily to organize and become politically engaged themselves, right? Now, in 1966, James Forman, along with Stokely Carmichael, would lead the transition of SNCC from a religious to a secular pride in Black culture and violence. Now, Carmichael isn't necessarily placed usually in the kind of pantheon of Black freethinkers, the few that we might generally have known about. But nevertheless, he was an atheist, and he developed his atheism at a fairly young age. Carmichael, like a lot of other Black radicals, especially in the 20s and 30s, was an immigrant from Trinidad, but he had grown up in the Bronx. He lived in the Bronx since the time he was 10 years old. And he ended up attending the prestigious Bronx High School of Science, where he befriended a kid named Gene Dennis, whose father worked in the Communist Party. Carmichael began attending meetings of the Young Communist League, and he quickly embraced atheism. So he was someone who came to communism for political purposes, but then started to sort of embrace their religious skepticism and their atheism. And like James Forman, this is a perspective that he would kind of bring to his civil rights work and his work as one of the founders of the Black Power movement in the 1960s and in ensuing decades. Now, the main institutional expression of Black Power, which was an ideology or a sort of set of ideas, but the main institutional expression of this ideology would be the Black Panther Party. This is a secular organization founded in Oakland, California in 1966 by Huey Newton and Bobby Seale. Major sort of programs of the Black Panther Party included health clinics, free breakfast for children. They also embraced the focus on armed self-defense of advocates of Black Power. But they also started sort of job training, funds for legal defense, and basically things to sort of empower African Americans, right? To put the ideology of Black Power into practice on the ground. And many prominent leaders, as well as rank and file members of the Black Panther Party, including Huey Newton, Stokely Carmichael, David Hilliard, and Eldridge Cleaver, were sort of very outspoken in their atheism. Like earlier thinkers, they saw the church as conservative, and they advanced a humanist politics that rejected the authority of what they termed derisively Uncle Tom bootlicking preachers. Now, along with the Black Panther Party, we see a sort of renewed literary and intellectual movement during this period that sort of drew from Black Power, and this was known as the Black Arts Movement, which lasted roughly a decade from the mid-1960s through the mid-1970s. And like the earlier Harlem Renaissance, a lot of writers and thinkers of the Black Arts Movement would likewise embrace free filing, including James Baldwin, right, who would explore secular themes and anti-religious themes in multiple works, including The Fire Next Time, Blues for Mr. Charlie, and Go Tell It on the Mountain. And these sort of really demonstrate strongly the influence of his own personal rejection of Christianity. Along with Baldwin, Lorraine Hansberry was another important writer of the Black Arts Movement and somebody whose secularism sort of heavily influenced her literature. And so what we see among these writers of the Black Arts Movement is they're not sort of writers who just happen to be atheists, right? But they're writers whose atheism really strongly influences what they choose to write about, right? In Blues for Mr. Charlie, for example, James Baldwin really kind of goes in on the strong ties that he sees between racism and Christianity, as well as in looking at Black religiosity. He has one of the characters really strongly critique this sort of otherworldly tendencies in Black religion, as well as the tendencies from his perspective of African Americans to basically forgive their enemies and to forgive racists for what they've done to Black people, right? Generally speaking, from the 19th century up through the end of the Civil Rights Movement, we see that Black freethinkers have been much more numerous than we were probably ever led to believe in any class or educational setting that we might have been in. These were some of the key intellectuals and political activists and artists and writers within African American history, people at sort of the forefront of shaping Black culture, of shaping Black institutions, political life, and political organizations. And their own political ideology, their own literary productions, and cultural work was highly shaped by their secular perspectives, showing us that free thought and secularism has been a much more prominent and important part of African American cultural and political life than we've ever been led to believe. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Christopher. That's great. That's so great. I never tire of hearing about the people who've come before us and who've done what you just said, shaping Black culture and politics and activism, and who have left us this legacy, right, with which we can explore and examine and revisit pretty much at any time. There's so much to chew from or to bite off. Where can we talk a little bit about your sources? I think I've heard you talk about how accessible some of these things are. I certainly the plays that Lorraine Hansberry plays, and the books that Richard written. Some of the folks who are a little bit more well known.
Yep.
We know we can find those. But what was it like for you to access? Going back to the beginning of your when you talked about the slave narratives and the travel, I guess, literature that you found. Can you tell us a little bit about that process?
Yeah, sure. Those are pretty highly accessible documents and sources as well. So nearly all of the slave narratives, or probably all of them, you can find on this site, Documenting the American South, which is it's put out by UNC Chapel Hill. And it just contains a wealth of books and other publications from Southerners, white and Black, from the early 19th century, for really most of the 19th century. So pretty much if a slave narrative was published, it's on Documenting the American South, right? And you can sort of search by region. You can have different ways of kind of searching through those. So I just kind of started going through some that I knew, right, and then just randomly searching through it and finding other ones there. So that was really helpful, as well as like issues of the Truth Seeker, which aren't super accessible unless you have a university account or something like that. But still research that, if you do have some kind of academic credentials or know somebody who does, you can do that type of research from your living room, right? And I think actually now Roderick Bradford has digitized or has sort of made available a lot of the older issues of the Truth Seeker. So you can kind of go through and look at, from the 1870s up through the 1890s, what were free thinkers talking about. That was really important for me when I was trying to get a sense of kind of racial divides among free thinkers. And I mean, you see some white free thinkers who are highly supportive of racial equality and the civil rights movement in the late 19th century. And then you see some Southern white free thinkers who are openly supporting lynchings and stuff like that. So there's kind of a sharp divide among free thinkers about racial issues and about whether or not race is something that free thinkers should even be considering, right? Should even be talking about.
Wow.
Yeah.
So people were concerned as people should even include race in free thought even back then.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because there's this idea that that moving outside of issues like separation of church and state, teaching of the Bible in schools, evolution, right? That once free thinkers move beyond those issues, they're sort of diluting the strength and the purity of their movement, right? You're taking attention away from free thought. So what does race have to do with free thought? In order to be a free thinker, you just have to not believe in God, right? You don't have to be some advocate for racial justice. Unfortunately, that view is still widely held among a lot of people today, right? But in the Truth Seeker, you can see the kind of origins of those debates.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. Let's go to some questions in the chat. Everybody, this is the portion where we get a chance to talk a little bit with the author. Let's see what we have here. If we do have anything. Here's a question from Robert. He says, in your experience, what tends to be the reaction of theists upon learning that some of the most celebrated blacks were not?
Kind of, I get a lot of expressions of, oh, I didn't really know that. That's really interesting. But sometimes I get sort of skepticism about whether or not they were actually free thinkers, right? I thought that, well, yeah, maybe they were atheists then, but they probably converted on their
Yeah, that's
deathbed or something like that. So some are generally interested and just didn't really know, but I've certainly encountered some of the skepticism about these historical figures, as well as skepticism about my own non-belief. Like, you can't really be an atheist, can you? I mean, like, what is the meaning
Sure.
of life if you're an atheist? So that's probably the most interesting reaction I think I get. Is
Forgot I
just
still
listening
haven't got
about
any
belief
mixer for
that
my John.
non-belief is
Just give
actually
me
a
some
thing
tequila and some,
among Black
yeah,
people.
some juice.
It's interesting. It makes me think.
No, do the
Goes back to that thing we were talking
yeah, do
about
that
earlier
sparkling
with
grape juice and
respectability and
some.
how coming out the abolitionist movement, there was a
You know
sense
what?
that you know respectability
Tequila on ice
always
and
should
bring
be
up that lime juice and let
identified
me squirt it in
as holy riches
there, please.
on all counts, and so in order to sell
Hmm?
abolitionism, that was sort of the
Mm-hmm.
narrative that we needed to adopt. Maybe people have internalized it, like, oh no.
Absolutely, and I mean, I think this respectability is actually one of the large reasons why we actually have evidence of atheism in slave communities.
No, I'm
Because
good right now. I just
a
have a
lot
drink
of
for right
these
now.
writers were talking about
Yo, she's
the
about to go
rise
fix
of
me a little
atheism
drinky
on the
drink. As soon as she
plantations.
get back with my
They
drink,
were
I'll pull the
questioning
camera back
this,
and
right?
sit and
They
chat for
were
a minute.
just sort of pointing out this phenomenon, and they were, a lot of the slaves on this plantation just gamble, get drunk, and fight on Sundays, and they curse the idea of God. But they're using that as an argument for abolition. They're saying, look at what slavery is doing to these people, not to me. I'm a good Black person, right? But these other people are sort of degenerate, and they're drunks and they're gamblers because of slavery. So it's like, yeah, this respectability politics is one of the reasons why this actually becomes a theme in slave narratives, right? They're pointing out this history because, or this sort of phenomenon, because they think it will make an effective argument for abolition among both white and Black abolitionists.
Wow, it's amazing. It's amazing. Can you talk a little bit about Red Summer? You mentioned moving along into the Harlem Renaissance, that Red Summer was one of the sort of, it was one of the things that precipitated the migration, the Great Migration from the South, and that when people got to and situated in the North, and specifically in Harlem, and they felt a little bit more comfortable with being able to kind of, I guess, kind of shed some things that they felt they couldn't express when they were in their homes.
So the Red Summer of 1919 had its roots in a few different developments. One was just a sort of tiredness with agitation of all sorts, right? It's the end of World War One, and people are just tired of this sort of political agitation, white people, right? And then there's also a very staunch anti-communism that we see arising in the United States right around that same time. The Russian Revolution had just happened. I think it started in 1917, if I'm not mistaken. So we're just coming off of the Russian Revolution happening, and there's a sense that for a lot of whites in the United States, there's sort of a tie between sort of anti-racist agitation and communist infiltration, right? It's also a period where we see rising immigration to the United States. So there's just fear of the influence of communists and anarchists from Europe sort of ties together with this sort of opposition to Black agitation and Black political organizing. So that's why I think you see such a staunch backlash to African Americans and to sort of African Americans' political activity during that time period. So, yeah, like I said, for some, the backlash and the racial violence caused folks like Richard B. Moore and W.A. Domingo and others, these Caribbean immigrants to the United States, it caused them to form organizations like the African Blood Brotherhood, which is a Black communist organization comprised of a lot of freethinkers who were kind of, they actually were sort of forerunners of the Black Panther Party in that they were training their members in self-defense tactics and in shooting and things like that. So it causes some to go that route, but then for a lot more people, I think it caused them to go the route of cultural politics and emphasizing literary production and artistic production as a way of kind of more implicitly combating racism rather than sort of openly doing it through organization.
Wow. You mentioned in the book that a lot of the Caribbean immigrants, W.A. Domingo, and I'm not sure about Hubert Harrison, but the other person that you mentioned, um, maybe Richard B. Moore, you mentioned something about them being, having been active politically and organized in their own, where they came from in the islands in Jamaica and Trinidad, people who fought in the First World War, or people who were already activated, where they were from, and so when they came to the States, they just sort of kind of transferred that into
exactly. Yeah, Claude McKay was another, right, a Jamaican immigrant, and a lot of them had been introduced to socialism back in the Caribbean, right? They had been politically active in their country, and many we see had traveled around to different Caribbean nations. So they developed something of a kind of Pan-Africanist perspective even before coming to the United States. They're also coming from traditions where the church was not as sort of strongly ingrained in their culture, as it was in the United States, right? So some of them were just really shocked when they encountered American churches and when they encountered racism in American churches, right? So for some, maybe they weren't necessarily staunch atheists or agnostics when they got here, but they became they became free thinkers soon enough in their encounters with American racism.
And there was also something that you touched on briefly where you mentioned a little bit of a clash, a culture clash with some of those Caribbean folks coming up, and maybe due to the racism part or just a general culture clash. Did you talk a little bit just briefly on that, the fact that maybe, I forgot who the person was, but there was one person who kind of didn't, like you said, they kind of didn't identify too well with whatever was happening in the churches, and they felt
I might play some cyberpunk today.
perhaps discriminating against them from being from somewhere else. So even within our own, groups, there was that culture clash.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that would become more pronounced in the 1960s, right? I think in 1965 we had an Immigration Act that sort of opened up a lot more opportunities for immigration from the Caribbean and African and Asian nations. So it became really pronounced then, but yeah, pretty early on in the 1920s and the 1930s, you certainly see sort of disagreements and cultural clashes between Caribbean migrants and African Americans, born within the United States. Especially in the 1930s, you have competition for very scarce resources during the Great Depression. So there's competition over jobs and things like that, but also just sort of different cultural emphases and backgrounds, right? Like I mentioned, of course, the sort of strength of the Black church really being very shocking, I think, to some Caribbean migrants, especially some from like Jamaica, for example, which is still controlled by Britain, who might have been Anglicans in Jamaica, right? So, you do your 1 hour church service once a week, but it's not really a huge deal. And Black religion is obviously very different from that in the United States. So it's sort of a beginning or an origin to, I think, what would become much stronger and more pronounced divisions between Blacks in the 1960s and 1970s with heavier immigration from the Caribbean.
I wonder if that has any link to Last week we had Andrew Seidel on, and he talked a lot about, his book is The Founding Fathers or The Founding Myth, and the composition of our religious landscape being so very heavily Protestant from the beginning was something that was a thread throughout. It created a competition, and it created a sense of just sort of endless evolution of denominations. And to your point, if you're from a British island, we have the Anglican Church primarily. There isn't a whole lot of competition. You just go to church, you're Christian, and you keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, so in countries like that, with the state church, you actually see much less of an influence of religiosity, right? Where it's not, where it's kind of sort of mandated from above, and people sort of push back against that sort of forced religiosity. In the United States, it's not really forced. People are getting that chance to kind of choose what they want to do.
Right. I'm going to go to the chat real quick. Walter sends in something. He says he recently skimmed Stewart's biography of Alain Locke. I don't remember Stewart saying Locke was a free thinker. To what extent were people of the Harlem Renaissance?
Yeah, that shit's good.
Yeah, so many of the Harlem Renaissance writers, and Locke was a free thinker, but he's one where I found evidence of his free thought in personal correspondence, right, in letters, dating back to his time at Harvard. He was the second black graduate of Harvard after Du Bois. And I found evidence of his secularism in personal correspondence, right, between him and his mother, where he's sort of castigating religion and kind of railing against it. Many were more implicitly free thinkers. So, like Langston Hughes, for example, used poetry to critique religion, right? Song for a Dark Girl was one where he's talking about a lynching in the United States and uses that poem to sort of question whether God, it might be a racist, God might be on the side of those doing the lynchings. But you can see this is sort of a method where he can say, well, this is just a poem. It's not necessarily what I think. It's just an artistic production, right? Same thing with Nella Larson. Even though everybody knew Helga Crane was Nella Larson, everyone knew it was an autobiographical novel. Nevertheless, she could still say, this is a novel, right? This isn't a memoir about me. But again, with Nella Larson, I found kind of personal correspondence that kind of speaks, that speaks to her free thought and her secularism. Now, later on in their lives, you start to get some of these Harlem Renaissance writers being more explicit. Not necessarily during the time of the Renaissance, but a little bit later, right? So Langston Hughes, The Big C, and Zora Neale Hurston, Dust Tracks on the Road, they both published their autobiographies in the early 1940s, well after the Harlem Renaissance had ended, right? A good 10 years after it had ended. Probably one of the few exceptions was Hubert Harrison, right? I wouldn't necessarily place him in the Harlem Renaissance, but in that socialist and communist movement, he was very open about his secularism in speeches that he gave throughout Harlem, as well as in publications in places in journals like the Truth Seeker, right? So he was fairly open about his secularism. Du Bois was he was a little more open in that he was publishing pretty strong critiques of the church in the Crisis magazine. So most were kind of implicit with it, but a few kind of let their thoughts be known a bit more. Locke wasn't one of those who was kind of going around trying to convert others to atheism or anything. For him, religion was sort of a highly personal thing, or non-religion, as it were, was sort of a highly personal thing. So he wasn't trying to like really spread his secular ideas.
That's amazing. Let's just do two more questions. I have a question. Speaking of Hubert Harrison, and as I told you before, I was incredibly surprised and ashamed to learn that I had not learned about Hubert Harrison, who is where I'm from. I'm from St. Croix, and you know, to hear of his migration and his outspokenness and organization, and how in the book and how that influenced the Garveyite movement, and then how through the chain, the link that influenced the parents of Malcolm X, which would then influence Malcolm X language, which would then later on sort of be, you know, kind of passed on down into eventually the civil rights and the Black Power movement. Can you talk about those links? In case I said it wrong, can you just talk a little bit about those links from him that sort of go throughout the civil rights movement?
Yeah. Well, Hubert Harrison, like a lot of these Caribbean immigrants, was kind of developed a Black internationalist perspective, a Pan-Africanist perspective, where he saw sort of the fates and destinies of Black people around the world as linked, right? And so for him, it wasn't enough to just critique racism in the United States, but it was really his goal to build kind of international solidarity among Black peoples, right, to fight racism and colonialism all over the globe. Now, Hubert Harrison was close with Richard B. Moore, another atheist, communist Caribbean immigrant, right? They actually attended the same church in Harlem. Believe it or not, it was the Harlem Unitarian, right? So, you know, very open to a range of religious or non-religious perspectives. This church had more of a kind of forum-style service where you would have talks or debates on particular subjects. So it wasn't out of the ordinary for atheists to attend that church. And in fact, after Harrison's death in 1928, the Harlem Unitarian Church was renamed the Hubert H. Harrison Memorial Church. So, you know, in that church, you know, Harrison would speak with Richard B. Moore, right, and would help to sort of inform his ideas. Now, Richard B. Moore would have sort of a long activist career within Harlem. And when I was doing research for the last chapter of the book, and looking into Black Power and the rise of the Black Panther Party, I was actually reading through Stokely Carmichael's autobiography, Ready for Revolution. And Carmichael talks about, actually opened up chapter 4 with this vignette about Carmichael, how he's living in the Bronx in the 1950s, right? He's living largely in a Jewish neighborhood, right? The Bronx is much whiter than it would be later on. So there were a lot fewer Black people. He was in an area where he couldn't even find a good Black barber. So he would travel down to Harlem, hang out with his cousin Inez, and get his haircuts at a barber shop in Harlem. And while he was there, he would encounter a much older Richard B. Moore up on a step ladder or up on a milk crate or something, giving speeches, right? And Moore was, you know, still a committed kind of communist and Pan-Africanist. And Carmichael says that, you know, speakers like Moore, speakers like Queen Mother Audley Moore, one of the founders of the reparations movement, you know, speakers like these that he would encounter in Harlem really helped to shape his own kind of Pan-African perspective. So yeah, I mean, we see these links between these Black activists like Harrison in the 1910s, Richard Moore in the 1920s, some of whom are still alive, still giving speeches, still hanging out at the barber shops, or even just hanging out on the corner, kind of schooling the younger up-and-coming activists and secularists, and helping to shape their perspectives that even now are still shaping the political ideology of people in the Black Lives Matter movement. Some folks now are going back to the writings of Black Panther Party activists and leaders and saying, that's some good ideas back in the 1960s.
That's exactly why I wanted to.
I mean, that's where I get a lot of my political ideologies from, is from the Black Panther Party as well, and the Black Muslim Nation of Islam, which I'm not religious, but I definitely agree with a lot of the way that they structure themselves. And I would definitely, if I was alive during that time, I think that I would still be non-secular, atheist, more or less an atheist. So I joined either movement, but I would definitely agree and side more with Malcolm X than
Ralph Ellison,
Dr.
although I
King.
probably should have. But there are other people who could have been in the book, right? There are folks like some Black Unitarians, right? Frances Ella Watkins Harper could have probably been in the book. She attended sort of a Unitarian deist church in the late 19th century, and some others. But eventually, at some point, you're writing a 50-page chapter and you're just tired. Like, okay, I'm done. So I thought about trying to look for more stuff on Ralph Ellison, but I felt like it would have made the chapter I was working on a little bit too unwieldy, so I really didn't look into it. But I'm not surprising that Ellison would have insisted on, or I'm not surprised that he would have insisted on a secular funeral because again and again, in both the Harlem Renaissance and in the Black Arts Movement, we see that some of the leading Black freethinkers are also writers, are intellectuals, right? And it's like the form of literature, of novels, of poetry allows you a sort of creativity and flexibility in sort of expressing some of these ideas than maybe other kind of literary forms would, right? And writers are just people who are engaged in very solitary enterprises, right? I'm not a novelist or anything, but I write books and you're just alone a lot of the time. So it's not surprising that these are people that we see sort of overly represented among the free thought ranks. So I'm glad you mentioned this, Ralph, and thank you for that. And I'm going to look into it a little bit more because I'm writing a second volume on Black free thought, and that's mainly going to look at the 1970s up through the present. But I'll have like probably one chapter offering some historical background. Chapter, I'm going to be trying to include stuff that I didn't write in Black Freethinkers Volume 1. So the history of Black free thought up through the civil rights movement, but trying to highlight some new thinkers and some maybe new trends that I didn't go into in this first book.
Speaking of that, right before we finish, I missed a question from Adisa who asked about Thurgood Marshall. Anything written about him that is relevant? I'm not sure if he is theist identified. I'm not sure if he identified.
Yeah, my understanding, he was a theist. So I didn't really look into him. I didn't find anything about his skepticism.
Okay. Sweet. Well, Christopher, this has been an amazing journey for us. Thank you for not just coming to the legacy session, but for opening and closing it. I really wanted to feature your work through this. It is really what grounded this summit and this project, which is to highlight this legacy that you've articulated in this book. The book is called Black Freethinkers, a history of African American secularism. You'll find the link in the chat. Everybody, if you want, just go ahead and grab that link. It's a Google document. I just put it in there one more time. It's going to have pretty much whatever you want to find Christopher in terms of his writings and where you can get the book. And I also want to just generally thank everybody who's come back to this session every week that we've done it since September. It's been a whole lot going on. We've got a presidential general election. We encourage everybody to go out and vote. We've got a pandemic that we're living through and surviving through. We've got a whole lot going on. But thank you for spending your Saturdays with us for the last 5 weeks. We've had some amazing talks and we've learned some amazing lessons. I hope that through this experience, you can feel a little bit more grounded and assert yourself in your identity, or at least begin to just sort of look into some of these things a little bit more, so that when people talk about whether or not you are really a non-believer or not, as Chris said, that you really feel like, no, I'm grounded in this, and it's not just me as an individual. Like, there is a long line of descent in our communities, specifically as Black people, as women, as LGBT folks, as people from the United States, as people from outside the United States. We've been here, and that's the whole point of this conversation. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining. I want to thank Nandisa for co-hosting with me. She couldn't make it today, but I definitely am so thankful for her support, especially behind the scenes with this. I want to thank all the panelists. I want to thank the American Humanist Association for helping to underwrite this and make this possible. So thank you once again, Christopher, for your expertise and for sharing this information with us in general, but also here in this program. And we will see you on the other side. We won't have an after chat today, but we will definitely see you, and we hope that you continue to support Black Nonbelievers. You can go to the website blacknonbelievers.com or blacknonbelievers.org, and you can find Black Nonbelievers of DC on Facebook, BN of DC, and you can check us out and follow us there. Thank you so much. All right, talk to you all later. Bye.
I really need a smaller brush.
I'm about to let the dog out. You want another drink?
Oh yeah. Excuse me. Black non-believers. Kind of happy I found this site.
So what's everybody gonna play after Cyberpunk now? Nothing?
There is nothing else coming out right yet. Some people are still playing other games though. That Spider-Man, that Miles Morales, people still are playing that. And then Assassin's Creed Valhalla, a lot of people are playing that, but as long as there's Call of Duty out there, nobody will get too bored.
What is Black Ops? Is that part of another game or that's the game itself?
That's the game itself, Call of Duty Black Ops. I even keep thinking about getting a newer one, just so I can have something to play.
It seems like that's the one game I see everybody is still playing.
Yeah,
They're not happy about it, but it's like it's theirs. So
Yep.
play Black Ops.
Welcome everyone, we're just getting people in, so if you just give us a few moments while we get people in through the doors, that would be really helpful. Roger is on the piano, giving us a little bit of a tune while we get people in, so thank you everyone, we'll be starting shortly.
Come on, Sons. Let's go.
everyone. We'll be getting started very shortly. We'll give it just a few more minutes. Thank you, Roger, for providing us with some music. In the meantime.
Dude name is Roger. In the club with that Roger.
Some nice new church music.
We'll be ready to go in 1 minute. 1 minute.
Oh damn.
You drunk already? I said you drunk already?
They're just waiting for the show to get started, and he's playing the piano live in his living room, waiting for their stream to start. I guess they're just waiting for enough viewers to come in.
No, that's what I said. He sounds really, really
Yeah, like you
good.
say, if you sleepy, like nigga.
All right,
He
all
sounds
right,
so
everyone.
good. I'm sitting here like.
Thank you all very much. Thank you very much, Ro, for providing us with some welcoming music.
Check her out. She got the
We are going
the
to
blind
get
ball head.
this meeting started, this event started. And very, very excited to be here with you this morning or afternoon or wherever you are joining us from your time zone. My name is Mandisa Thomas. I am the founder and president of Black Nonbelievers Incorporated, which is located in the Atlanta, Georgia area. We are a 501c3 organization headquartered in the Atlanta, Georgia area. And I might have said that before. That is dedicated to providing community for as well as advocacy for Blacks and allies who are leaving religion, who have already left religion, and who might otherwise be shunned by family members and friends. And instead of accepting dogma, we determine truth and morality through reason and evidence. Happy to be joined here today, co-hosting this event with the Association of Black Humanists, which is based in London, in the United Kingdom. And co-hosting this event with me from the organization is Clive Arude. Please correct me if I pronounce that incorrectly. This is a celebration of atheism and humanism across the African diaspora. And what's historic and monumental about this is that as the rise of religious nuns continues to increase, we're seeing that amongst in the African diaspora and people of color across the world, we're seeing that secularism is it's increasing, and it was important, especially this year, to see us come together and show that we are doing some amazing things around the world, especially in the face of religious privilege and in some cases tyranny. And so we're here today to present you with some organizers, speakers, and performers so that you can see what we're all doing around the world and how we're coming together and how we can continue working together as well. So at this time, I will turn it over to Clive to say a few words. Clive, are you unmuted?
Yep.
Okay.
There we go. There we go. Thank you very much, and very warm welcome to everyone. Great. I'm representing the Association of Black Humanists based in the UK, and we did a little bit to help to get this event together. And again, we are here to as a sort of safe space for people who are left religions, because as we all know, in the Black community, religion is a very powerful influence, and process to provide safe space, and also to provide an alternative, because once you've left religion, you're pretty much cut off all sorts of social ties and all sorts of social networks, and we hope to provide an alternative family, if you like, for people who are in that position. So we are really, really happy to see so many of you here today supporting this event, and also we have to say thank you to people from all around the world, whether you're from Black descendants from Africa or anywhere else, or from other ethnic communities around the world, for lending us your support, and hopefully we'll hear from you as the day goes on. Thank you so much, and we're going to have to move quickly because the time is short and we've got so much to get through.
I'm about to flip the camera in a second, bro.
So I'd just like to finish by asking Mandisa to take over again, and we're going to move on with the rest of the program.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Clive. And yes, once again, thank you to everyone tuning in today or this morning, afternoon, again, wherever you're joining us from. We appreciate all the support and camaraderie and the love that we've built with our colleagues and friends and loved ones within this community. And one of the people that I'm going to be introducing next is very well known in the international humanist, atheist, and secular community. Is a writer, has done work on trying to combat witchcraft on the continent of Africa. Well-noted scholar on humanism. And I will actually let him introduce himself a bit more as this goes on. So please welcome our first speaker for the program, Dr. Leo Igwe.
Igwe.
Hello. Yes, thank you, Mandisa, and thank you, Clive. The Association of Black Humanists and Black Non-Believers for convening this historic meeting and for creating this platform to highlight Black atheist and humanist pride. It's exciting to be part of this event and to be connected with a growing network of Black non-believers, skeptics, free thinkers. In fact, no matter how you want to identify yourself, historical, cultural, and social equivalencies have made it difficult for non-believers in Black community to come out and openly identify themselves as humanists or atheists or skeptics. But as this online event and other recent developments have shown, the free thought landscape in Africa and the African diaspora is changing, and this is a cause for celebration even amidst the gathering clouds.
Eat the food, lose the weight. It's that simple.
Introducing the on social media, COVID cases are rising rapidly across the UK in large part due to new variant. The NHS is treating many more patients and vaccinating vulnerable citizens, blah, blah, blah. We must act now or the NHS will come under even greater pressure. Here's what Sky News is reporting, the latest. Boris Johnson set out further steps to combat new variant spread in TV address at 8 p.m. The UK coronavirus alert level was for the first time raised from level 4 to level 5 on Monday. The four nations of the UK's chief medical officer said there is a material risk of the National Health Service in several areas being overwhelmed over the next 21 days without further action.
Don't judge me.
What are you drawing?
Slow.
A slow?
Okay. This doesn't have specifics like the BBC News article does. They talk about what they think will happen. BBC News, UK, Prime Minister set to announce New England lockdown. It is expected people will be told to work from home if possible, and schools will close for most pupils. It is expected that the new rules will be implemented. The Prime Minister is likely to urge the public to follow the new rules from midnight. Scotland has already announced a new lockdown today. with schools to be
My third
closed.
grade teacher used to say pupils.
I was about to say I haven't heard that since probably elementary school, and only time I think I heard it past then was maybe like writing papers.
It is also under blah 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 blah.
That's how the
blah,
English
blah,
talk
blah,
though.
blah, blah.
Schools will be closed for most pupils.
Yeah, this is the daily confirmed cases at high
I guess
level.
you're not a
And
student until you go to
today, they're like
university.
higher than this. They're like
When you
58,000
study
something.
at the
Today.
university,
Today set a
then you're
record,
a student, and
58,000
you should be
cases, and also a
studious.
record in
But
hospitalization.
until then, you're
So
just
it's
a
even higher.
pupil.
This doesn't even have today on it, I don't think.
But now,
But it has,
Here is, by the way, let me just show you this
he
really
has a
quick.
countdown that says 10 minutes before Boris Johnson is supposed to give an address to the nation of the EU, I guess. Isn't he?
See,
like,
so it says a live broadcast is starting
Minister or some
shortly.
shit, Boris
That's
Johnson?
the official 10 Downing Street site. That's where we will be watching the broadcast.
But yeah, they
It's
talking
10
about
Downing
England
Street.
got
That's the
some new
government
strand
site.
of COVID, so I guess they're gonna.
So we'll be checking
Europe is
that
about
out
to
when it starts.
Fucking
Let me just
say
make
whatever
sure
their new
I'm
guidelines
getting,
are gonna be.
I want to make sure I'm getting audio here. It's good to do an audio test before it actually starts, just to make sure it's working. I'll see if I can hear myself. Gotta do it this way. In the broadcast. There you go. There we go. I can hear myself. Wonderful. Perfect. All right. Give me a shout. We have 9 minutes. 9 minutes until the Prime Minister's address.
Yeah,
You can
Boris
see the
Johnson is the
Telegraph
Prime
says it is
Minister,
expected
basically
the
the
measures
president.
will include a return to shielding. That's not a term we really hear in the U.S., but from my understanding, that's when you take specific measures to really isolate vulnerable people in the population, to really keep them away from other people. Further school closures and stronger stay-at-home messaging, says the Telegraph.
A stronger stay-at-home.
Do you want
message.
to know a secret? It says, will
hear, like, what
Boris
does that
Johnson be
mean?
live or
Is this
pre-recorded
curfews
live?
and
I'm
lockdowns
not
again?
sure what it will be. That's a good question.
Yeah, what does
Sorry, you too.
a stronger
Lip balm
stay-at-home
up here.
message mean?
Kieran says, I'm in high school. Does that mean the high schools will close? We don't know exactly. The reporting I've seen says that they think most schools will be closed in England. But we'll know in a few minutes. All right, hang on a second here. Also checking to see if there's any updated reporting. Oh, let's see what The Guardian is saying. Boris Johnson to make TV announcement. Do they have anything? Boris Johnson is due to make a TV address on Monday evening where he is set to announce mass school closures and tight lockdown restrictions. MPs will be recalled to Parliament from Wednesday.
MPs, military police.
The news came amid soaring infection numbers and hospital admissions, many linked to a new, more easily transmissible variant of the virus.
If that means if you didn't catch it the first time,
Okay.
you're gonna catch it this time.
They have anything here?
More easily transmitted variant of the virus. They're trying to tell y'all everything right now. I wonder if this shit is gonna spread over here to the US, yo.
In Wales, which is part of the UK, their schools and colleges are moving to remote teaching until 18th of January. Scotland has announced that most schools there will be closed until at least February 1st. we are just bringing you live updates here. Hang on. I have too many things open on my desktop right now. About 5 minutes until the live broadcast is supposed to, until Boris Johnson's address starts. So you can see there, it says a live broadcast is starting shortly. This is the official 10 Downing Street site. So I'm going to leave it up there. Write in your comments as we await for Boris Johnson to speak. After he speaks, we will take some comments and questions from you guys.
Shit about to get real.
Our viewer Riverboy says it will be live and says Sussex hospitals are taking patients from Essex and Kent as they are overwhelmed. That's what Riverboy says. G.I. Wood, our viewer, says we are relieved in Scotland. Lexi Morris says, do the people there seem happy or upset at this news? That's a fair question. I honestly don't know. I mean, I'm guessing there might be people who are doing both. I'm not there. I don't have a good sense of what the general feeling is.
Everywhere, in every nation, every country.
Caesar Day says, not sure what more they can lock down in London, maybe reduce hours of essential schools closed except for those in vulnerables, etc. Yeah, I mean, so right now, much of the country, I think the majority of the country is already in tier 4, which is the highest tier right now. But I know school closings is one thing. Also, there may be further restrictions on, you're still allowed right now to meet up with, I don't know if it's multiple people or like one or more people outdoors. Like, I mean, you could get really strict and say you're not allowed to meet up with anyone outdoors. We were reading an article about this yesterday about like what tier 5 might look like. So that's another restriction you might see is on people meeting up with other people outdoors. Also, I think right now there's no time limit on how long you're allowed to exercise outside, but that could be changed too. But yeah, but I do remember one article, I think it was a Sky News article yesterday, talking about possible limits on how many people you can meet up with outdoors. So we'll see if that has anything, we'll see if that's something he announces too. It just remains to be seen.
About to get crazy over there.
All right, we're waiting here about 3 minutes until this is supposed to start. And hang on a second here, let me get this up on the screen here. Now, by the way, like, there's if you're watching it, like, say on TV, it might take an extra couple seconds for you to see this, from the time I broadcast it to the time you get it, there's a slight delay.
Cases are doing right now.
We are showing you the official 10 Downing Street site. Let me just make sure you're getting sound. Yeah, it's there. The sound is there. The sound is there. All right, I'm going to stay on this. I'm not even going away. I'm not even going away from this. Let me just do this real quick. What I do want to do is do that. Let's do this. There we go.
Steve said he moved recently. There was a couple days where he didn't stream, and then he came back saying he was in a new.
All right, you get a couple minutes to make your comments. Write to me on Twitter @Lookner. Claire Williams thinks Boris will be late. He usually is.
Enough money.
I don't mind restrictions to help, but sick of people breaking the rules. Torchwood Gal says, I wonder how long before this type of lockdown occurs in the U.S.
Yep.
Well, in the U.S., it's up to the states to put these measures in. It's not done for the whole country. It's up to the states. But, we'll just have to see. I do think if you have increased transmission going on, if you start seeing cases jumping and hospitalizations jumping to the degree they are in the UK, even under strong, they've been going up in many places in the U.S. obviously, but if you start seeing further increases, even more increases due to the new strain, you could have new restrictions in the U.S. We'll just have to see what happens.
All right, so we're gonna have a new strain pop up in the U.S. and then
it also just depends on the states.
Biden and Harris get up in there. They're gonna implement like federal lockdowns for the states to implement.
Simon Pickup
like
says
how,
Boris usually
Trump
starts a
Trump
few
was
minutes
like, yo,
late.
let the governors handle that shit, yo. Handle that shit how y'all see
Jeff
fit,
Vegas says,
please.
what good are the restrictions if they aren't enforced? I don't have a good sense of, certainly I don't have a good sense of how many people are breaking the restrictions in the UK. In a second, I'll turn off the clock because the clock is gonna hit 0 and then start counting up. So in a second, I'm gonna turn off the clock and we'll just wait for it to start here. Okay, it is going to be 8 p.m. local time in 2 seconds, 1 second. Okay, I am turning off the clock because any moment now he will start.
I can't chill with my homies. The skate park's still gonna be full.
Okay, we are waiting. Again, this is the official 10 Downing Street broadcast we are watching right now.
That's from their parliament. 10 Downing Street. It's British Parliament, and we're going to listen to.
So he'll come on here again. I'm literally showing you the live feed from. I am showing you the live feed from 10 Downing Street. So as soon as they start broadcasting it, here it is.
Engaged in a great national effort to fight COVID. And there's no doubt that in the variant of the virus, our collective efforts were working and would have continued to work. But we now have a new variant of the virus, and it's been both frustrating and alarming to see the speed with which the new variant is spreading. Our scientists have confirmed this new variant is between 50 and 70% more transmissible. That means you're much, much more likely to catch the virus and to pass it on. As I speak to you tonight, our hospitals are under more pressure from COVID than at any time since the start of the pandemic. In England alone, the number of COVID patients in hospitals has increased by nearly a third in the last week to almost 27,000. And that number is 40% higher than the first peak in April. On the 29th of December, more than 80,000 people tested positive for COVID across the UK, a new record. The number of deaths is up by 20% over the last week and will sadly rise further. And my thoughts are with all those who've lost loved ones. With most of the country already under extreme measures, it's clear that we need to do more together to bring this new variant under control while our vaccines are rolled out. In England, we must therefore go into a national lockdown which is tough enough to contain this variant. That means the government is once again instructing you to stay at home. You may only leave home for limited reasons permitted in law, such as to shop for essentials, to work if you absolutely cannot work from home, to exercise, to seek medical assistance, or to escape domestic abuse. The full details of what you can and can't do will be available at gov.uk/coronavirus. If you're clinically extremely vulnerable, we're advising you to begin shielding again, and you will shortly receive a letter about what this means for you. And because we now have to do everything we possibly can to stop the spread of the disease, primary schools, secondary schools, and colleges across England must move to remote provision from tomorrow, except for vulnerable children and the children of key workers. Everyone will still be able to access early years settings such as nurseries. We recognise that this will mean it's not possible or fair for all exams to go ahead this summer as normal. The Education Secretary
Somebody ain't graduate.
to put in place alternative arrangements. We will provide extra support to ensure that pupils entitled to free school meals will continue to receive them while schools are closed, and we will distribute more devices to support road education. I completely understand this late change will cause millions of parents and pupils up and down the country. Parents whose children were in school today may reasonably ask why we did not take this decision sooner. And the answer is simply that we've been doing everything in our power to keep schools open, because we know how important each day in education is to children's life chances. And I want to stress that the problem is not that schools are unsafe for children. Children are still very unlikely to be severely affected by even the new variant of COVID. The problem is that schools may nonetheless act as vectors for transmission, causing the virus to spread between households. Today, the United Kingdom's chief medical officers have advised that the country should move to alert level 5, meaning that if action is not taken, NHS capacity may be overwhelmed within 21 days. Of course, there is one huge difference compared to last year. We're now rolling out the biggest vaccination programme in our history. So far, we in the UK have vaccinated more people than in the rest of Europe combined. With the arrival today of the UK's own Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, the pace of vaccination is accelerating. I can share with you tonight the NHS's realistic expectations for the vaccination programme in the coming weeks. By the middle of February, if things go well, and with a fair wind in our sails, we expect to have offered the first vaccine dose to everyone in the 4 top priority groups identified by the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation. That means vaccinating all residents in a care home for older adults and their carers, everyone over the age of 70, all frontline health and social care workers.
See, they're making it mandatory.
And everyone who is clinically extremely vulnerable. If we succeed in vaccinating all those groups, we will have removed huge numbers of people from the... Of course, that will eventually enable us to lift many of the restrictions we have endured for so long.
See?
I must emphasize that even if we achieve this goal...
If we vaccinate these many people in this specific group and dynamic of people, then we can release, let up on our restrictions and stuff. But until then, and he's not saying it's mandatory, but there's an ultimatum to this shit, yo. Lockdowns until these people get vaccinated or else.
There remains a time lag of 2 to 3 weeks from getting a jab to receiving immunity, and there will be a further time lag before the pressure on the NHS is lifted. So we should remain cautious about the timetable ahead. But if our understanding of the virus doesn't change dramatically once again, if the rollout of the vaccine programme continues to be successful, if deaths start to fall as the vaccine takes effect, and critically, if everyone plays their part by following the rules, then I hope we can steadily move out of lockdown, reopening schools after the February half-term and starting cautiously to move regions down the tiers. I want to say to everyone right across the UK that I know how tough this is. And I know how frustrated you are, and I know that you've had more than enough of government guidance about defeating this virus. But now, more than ever, we must pull together. You should follow the new rules from now, and they will become law in the early hours of Wednesday morning. Parliament will meet largely remotely that day. I know that the devolved administrations in Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland share my conviction that this is a pivotal moment and they're taking similar steps. The weeks ahead will be the hardest yet, but I really do believe that we're entering the last phase of the struggle, because with every jab that goes into our arms, we are tilting the odds against COVID.
Every jab we
and
get,
in favor
every
of the
vaccine that
people.
goes into our arm.
And thanks to the miracle of science, not only is the end in sight, but we know exactly how we will get there. But for now, I'm afraid you must once again stay at home, protect the NHS, and save lives. Thank you all very much.
What do you think, babe?
Okay, sorry. Let me just fix.
It's coming here next. It's coming here next.
Yo, watch now. So COVID-1, we're gonna get a hang of it. We're gonna get a vaccine. Vaccine in less than a year. Oh shit, we got a new variant.
COVID 2.0.
Okay, and now it's more catchier. 75% more this and that. And then now watch. The next time is gonna be like it's transforming into a super killer. This is gonna be a population destroyer. This shit is just gonna continue to mutate.
What? You want this?
No, I thought that was a cigarette. I don't know. I don't think this is gonna be the last quote unquote mutation of this thing. I really think they're gonna find something else. And then with the vaccine, okay, so we have COVID, made a vaccine, we got a new variant. So will the vaccine fight against the new variant? Or now they gotta tweak the vaccine?
And that's the other thing. The vaccine is not gonna be strong enough. You're gonna have to get it again every couple of months. Like, no, nobody's doing it.
And then he said it's a few weeks before you actually build immunity. 2 to 3 weeks before it's effective.
Which means you could catch it in that time.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
potentially catch it just from getting the vaccine. Or the Bell's palsy.
I don't know. They're trying to make it so scary that you feel like you have no choice but to take this vaccination.
And when you have some of your own doctors telling you that they don't want to take it, that lets you know. The same people who always try to give me a damn flu shot that I don't even want to take that are saying they don't want to take that vaccine. So if they're saying that, then you know. And it's hard to know who to trust. Like, I don't feel as though we have anybody we can trust. There's nobody that we can trust on a larger platform. Doesn't matter whether they're white, black, man, woman, Democrat, Republican, independent, nothing, rapper, entertainer, scientist, it don't matter. We cannot trust any of them.
Nope. And then the people we do trust, they only can speculate and know as much information as we get access to.
And what they're allowed to put out there, too.
Exactly. So it's like, I mean, we're all in the same fucking boat right now. I think there is a real agenda behind this vaccine, behind this pandemic. If it's real, however it got out, you know what I'm saying? If it was a mistake on the Chinese from their viral research lab that got out into the population, or if it was some strange mutation because of a dirty ass wet market where people are slaughtering animals and not using sanitary precautions to stop the spread of germs and disease, whatever it is, you know what I'm saying? I still think that they're using it as a political motive to push an agenda, whatever that may be. Once again, population control, population reduction, the introduction of a new global society where we are a more stay-at-home society, where the thing is, what is it, teleworking or whatever, we don't need big office buildings anymore and all this office space when we have the capabilities of telecommuting and just doing our jobs from home. The same thing with education.
The only thing with healthcare is like, because now people are just getting misdiagnosed for everything.
And I don't know.
Big Pharma's making all the money in the world.
Once again, this could be just another aspect of their soft kill, because I really do think that population control is a real thing. And are they just trying to blow up millions of people at once? No. So they use soft kill tactics where they poison your food and they poison your water and they poison your air and they poison your medicine. And it's just is another way to, fill us up with whatever chemicals to get us to be more docile, like the fluoride in the water, get us to be more susceptible, like the chemicals they spray on us and with the chemtrails.
Even if you drink purified, because I was drinking spring water, and then I started drinking purified water, because even with the spring water, they're like, well, where does it come from? Are there regulations where the water came from? Is it this? Is it that? So I started drinking purified water. Then a light bulb just went off in my head, like, well, you're still washing with the fluoride water. You still wash your hands with it. You wash your body with it. You wash your dishes with it. So it's like, and then, even then you could get one of those reverse water filters, but then you still got the chemicals everywhere else. And everything. Even the organic shit. Try buying organic food. Then you do research on that, and it's like, just because it's organic don't mean shit either.
Mm-hmm. Soft kill tactics, yo. Soft kill. They trying to get us.
You know what's crazy? My mom just texted me and said my stepdad just tested positive for COVID.
Oh, wow.
Literally just texted me and said that.
See what I'm saying?
The timing, though. Damn.
And now, once again, this fears people into.
And he's been sick as shit. And then they tested him, and then they're like, yep, you got COVID. I just want to know, when they're testing people, are they also, like, when they're sick, are you testing them for the flu? Or are you testing them for everything else? Or, because, like, how many cases has it been where people didn't even go get tested and they just diagnosed them? They tried to do that to me the one time, and I was like, no. And I went and got tested, negative. Went and got tested again, negative. But I definitely think they amped that shit up this time. Well, we are going to get vaccinated, or we're not going to be able to do anything. So we might as well just start our little organization now, go move into the woods and get ready.
Mm-hmm.
When shit hits the fan.
Alright. So that's all the skin tones are done. Now all I gotta do is fill in the clothes and the background. Keep it moving, keep it moving. Got away with 2 brushes just now. There. I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah. Let me just fix the headline. So new national lockdown in England. We just heard that. The schools are pretty much closing, and let me just fix the headline here. So I want to hear from you at Lookner on Twitter. Let me know your thoughts at Lookner on Twitter. Okay, so he just announced a new national lockdown, and he did say that that most of the schools would pretty much be closed, except for. Let me just get you the specifics.
So this was just announced like several minutes ago that England is going back into a high-level lockdown, which may prompt surrounding countries to go back into a high-level lockdown, which may have the possibility of spreading back over here to the U.S. again. So I would advise everybody to try to keep up with the news for the next couple of days. I know it gets old and boring, and it sounds like they keep repeating the same thing over and over, but a couple of weeks ago they announced a new variant of the coronavirus that's popping up in Europe, and so they just now said we're going back into high-level lockdown, we're shutting down the schools and everything all over again. So like I say, just keep up with the news and see what our government is going to do over here in the U.S.
Said pretty much the schools are closing. He also mentioned shielding too. I think he mentioned about people who are particularly vulnerable basically aren't allowed to leave home, except for medical and exercise. Let me get you a summary.
Yeah, it's back to this mandatory stay-at-home shit over there, yo. You know?
New national lockdown. This is Sky News. He has announced a new national lockdown with people instructed to stay at home as they did during March lockdown. This is for all of England, not so national lockdown. It's not like, well, these are rules that apply to the entire country. There have been plenty of areas under significant rules in England. There were rules across the country, but this is a national lockdown for all of England. The rules applying the entire country. He said people across the whole country must now stay at home apart from 5 exceptions. For work, if people cannot work from home, such as those in the construction sector or workers, to shop for necessities such as food or medicines, to exercise once a day at a local location. This can include one other person from outside someone's household or support childcare bubble. To provide care or help to vulnerable people, to attend medical appointments or medical care, or to flee the threat of harm or violence. All primary schools, secondary schools, and colleges will move online learning from tomorrow. However, nurseries can stay open. So, yeah, I mean, you can see the whole country must stay at home, except unless you're doing these things. You can't go and just hang out with people. I believe non-essential shopping will be closed for the entire country. That's
what is non-essential shopping? So you can't go buy sneakers and hoodies and shit?
All primary schools, secondary schools, and colleges will move to online learning for tomorrow.
Oh,
I believe, like,
no, I just didn't feel like
smoking
workers
might be able to go to school, that kind of thing. But
damn,
basically, the schools are closed.
What is non-essential shopping? I mean, and Amazon said that for a minute, like when it was real hot over here.
Those who are judged to be clinically vulnerable are being urged to stay at home as much as possible and not go to work, even if they can't work from home. I don't know if that's a rule or urging. That's like, if you're in an at-risk group, they're urging you don't even work, even if you can't work from home. And you should only go outside for exercise or to attend health appointments. So, new national lockdown. Nikki Nebula says, what about non-essential travel?
I can't work
to
from
other countries?
home.
I don't recall him mentioning that. So usually, if my memory is right, like he doesn't cover everything in detail in his
Motherfuckers
speech.
just sitting in the
Like, he
house
doesn't get
more
into
often. They
all
got
the
shit else to do.
specifics. So maybe there's something about
I feel like
travel
trolling
that
some
didn't
silly
mention from
Americans.
this. I don't remember him mentioning it specifically. So give me a shout. Let me know your
salute,
thoughts on
sir.
this. But new national lockdown, and this is because this new variant
Just more
continues
British
to
trolls.
spread. Record number of cases continue in spite of the restrictions in the UK. Record number of hospitalizations continue. Okay.
It's getting crazy over there again, yo.
Give me a shout. Let me know your thoughts at Lookner on Twitter. I want to take some comments from you guys. Hang on a second here.
Y'all gonna get that vaccine, yo? Cause you know.
Hey guys, give me 1 second. Guys, can you give me just 1 second? Hang on 1 minute here. Hang on 1 minute.
You said a second, then a minute. Make up your mind, Steve.
Hang on 1 minute.
You know we didn't give away y'all snacks.
Oh damn. You sure, right?
I think I'm gonna
Yeah. What's wrong?
It hurts, like just on this side, but even if just touch it, it just hurts. Like I don't know. Probably about to get a nosebleed, but I don't know why my nose has been bleeding a lot lately.
Give me 1 minute,
a
guys. I'll be
nosebleed
right
here.
back and we'll take your
It's
comments.
just the cold and everything here, just changing my environment. I don't know what it is, but I don't know. Like my ears hurt, my throat hurts, my nose hurts. Probably just sinuses, smoking too many backwoods, and then I slept with the door closed. And every time I do that, I wake up with a sinus headache.
That's why I said we need to take that emergency, yo. I might get some Theraflu too.
Yes, I just took some of that Dayquil, but I want to get some ginger ale so I can drink that vitamin C.
Yeah, we'll definitely run out then. You gotta start combating against that shit early, yo. I need to get back on my multivitamins and start pumping up with vitamin C again, yo. And I actually listen to Joe Rogan a lot. He talks a lot about vitamin D, yo. I might get some vitamin D capsules. For the simple fact, I live in
the almond milk and the orange juice that I get has vitamin D.
Yeah. For the simple fact, yo, I do live in the Northeast, and it's gray a lot up here. It's just the region of the country, the elevation.
All right, we are back. I apologize. You may hear a little noise.
It's gray. The winters are long, and you don't have a lot of sunny days, yo. So
All right, let me take some more.
A lot of people are vitamin D deficient and don't even fucking realize it.
I'm sorry for the interruption. Okay, so I want to take some comments from you. Oh, and I want to get. I want to look in the chat rooms too. Open those back up,
the elderberry,
so I can see what you're saying.
That's spirulina that you
give me a second.
That's good. It's gross.
And I apologize for some.
And that's why I try to do something, because I mean, my girl noticed I don't eat vegetables like I should. I don't mind vegetables. I really don't, and I like vegetables. But do I cook them all the time though? Like no.
You're a healthier eater than me. You eat more than I do, like more vegetables and stuff. I'm picky, but I have to be like, babe,
I didn't see the specifics about that, but it looked to me.
I tried to get my vegetables in and just try to work out, and
if you're people across the whole country must now stay home apart from
I have tried different supplements and stuff for my health, and I take once again, like I feel like I don't eat enough vegetables, so I have like this superfood, and it's a blue-green algae that has so much chlorophyll in it and that's one of the main things you eat leafy green vegetables for is that plant melanin is basically what chlorophyll is, and so it's just full of fucking vitamins and minerals, and I've been taking that a lot lately, just to help supplement my diet for my lack of vegetables.
Hey, thanks by the way to our viewer.
Now with the flu season in full swing and COVID part 2 about to sweep across the world, I definitely feel like I just need to stay pumped up with like extra vitamin C. Now, I wasn't even scared the first time around. Like I really ain't do shit different
Cal
as
says,
much.
just to let you
but,
know a time
like,
frame, they will review 15 February.
get some vitamin C and
so
some
they
vitamin
had said
B
something about
and some
February
some
midterm.
B12 and some vitamin
They
D.
might be
You'll be alright.
opening up again. I didn't know what that meant. Hold on a second. You can see Laura Koonsberg posted, if vaccine works out, if everyone plays their part, if everything goes on as hoped, we can get out of this. We can start to get out of this, he said, by February half term. I don't know what half term means. What does half term mean?
That's what I don't know, man. This shit coming out too quick, yo, and people already getting Bell's palsy and all kind of shit from this shit, yo. It's just like
short holiday in the middle of the school term. So February holiday, I guess. I don't know exactly when that is.
So, I'm not getting the vaccine ever.
Oh,
not
yeah,
even
so
after
this was sent to
9
me by
months. I
Cal.
don't think I'll ever take that shit.
Boris
yo.
Johnson puts England into lockdown, expected to stay in place until mid-February.
Like in. But
So
once
that
again,
would
they
mean
may
that
find
schools
some type of way to make
would
it
be closed
mandatory,
until
yo. Like,
mid-February, and also just
if you
Or just
that
keep rolling
full
out
national
strands of it to where you have to, because it's like most
England is
things
set to
you
enter
get
another
it, you
national
don't get it
lockdown
again, or you get something that's similar but not the exact
which will
same.
remain in place for more than a
But
month. The Prime
if they
Minister
do it to
announced.
where you just
In
keep
effect,
getting
the
it
country
and
will
getting it
return
and
to
getting
the
it.
first lockdown in March, with people only allowed to leave their house for essential reasons.
That's how you
and the
know it's
majority of schools closed. The restrictions are expected to last at least until February 15th. Look, and they do not want to do this. You know, this is not, no one wants a lockdown. The government does not want to do a lockdown. It's just the numbers, the people getting this virus, the numbers of people getting it, the amount of people
I don't know, man.
even though they had strong
the people who are getting it at record levels and the government doesn't want to lock down.
This
And
new strain that's sweeping across the UK,
I feel you, Steve, but at the same time,
faster than
my
previous
conspiracy
strains,
brain
and
started
the
kicking in.
measures which might have worked to control the previous strains are not working to control the new strain. It's still, the hospitalizations and the cases are still going up. They're not falling, they're rising. Now they're less than they would be with no rules, but I'd say more, but still, they're trying to bring this under control. The number of COVID patients in the hospital in England, I actually think it's around 30,000 now, is over 40% higher than the peak level in April. The surging number of cases is down due to a new variant of COVID, which is 50% more transmissible, and was spreading in a frustrating and alarming manner, Mr. Johnson said.
It's 50%
like the
more
first
transmissible.
lockdown in March, the stay-at-home order would return with limited exceptions, including essential shopping, fleeing violence, caregiving, and medical appointments. You may only leave home for limited reasons.
But then once again, what are the consequences?
People can only meet with one other person from outside their household if it is for exercise purposes.
You can only meet up with one exercise buddy. Y'all can't.
Just hang
yeah,
out
y'all just can't hang out or nothing. Well, anytime me and my buddy just hanging out and be like, "Oh, what are you guys doing? Oh, we're exercising." Just you fuckers are just standing here. Yeah, this is actually we're planking right now.
I walked twice.
Yeah, took a step, nigga. Look, check my counter.
For key worker children, vulnerable children, malnourished.
Exercise.
So my time is running. I walked twice.
As in the first lockdown,
yeah.
all non-essential retail, hospitality, and personal care must close, including gyms and leisure facilities.
Hospitality, hotels, and everything.
All non-essential retail, hospitality, and personal care. Gyms,
I'm not going back into none of those type of jobs.
Places of worship and communal worship can remain open, but social distance measures must be in place.
Well, places of worship.
Basically, everything closed again, except for like the
churches,
essential shops, like groceries and stuff, and schools.
But they'll still be
schools are
out.
closed. Most schools are closed.
Yeah, holy blood and chips.
And they did mention these exams are canceled.
That's still taking people's money.
B.Tech exams scheduled. Oh, sorry. The future. No, I'm sorry. I that was wrong. B.Tech exams will continue, but the future of this year's GCSE, and A-level exams remains unclear. He didn't say they're canceled. He said it remains unclear. But the BTEC exams, I'm not familiar with those, will continue as planned. Cindy Hollander says, isn't this already happening in other countries? Certain countries, in certain parts, certain countries have their own restrictions. But this is the first I believe this is the first national lockdown in England since March. It's not for the whole of the UK, because when it comes to virus policy, the UK has 4 countries in it: England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales. And they each set their own virus policy. Scotland announced a new lockdown earlier today.
Because they had Brexit.
Yes, so
Britain
just
exited from that shit, from the United Union,
again,
or the European Union.
The different UK nations set their own virus policy. So his announcement today just applied to England. You can see here, Scotland ordered their own new lockdown earlier today, where they said that the schools most schools there are closed until February 1st.
We gotta leave for snacks and something.
Yeah, you remember that, babe, huh?
I said something else important. I better remind her to remind
Something
me.
more important than some gummy bears.
Yeah, it's something else more important than that shit. I just couldn't remember what it was. Like, fuck, yo. That snacks ain't the important shit. I was like, she just said some important shit.
Jared, our viewer writes and says this should have
both.
been
I'm 2 drinks and 2 blunts in the doobie in right now. So
that's from
my mind is on Munchie mode. I'm so sorry.
Jared thinks
But,
that
okay, so we need some ginger ale for your tummy.
Thank you for writing in, Jared. Dallas Birmingham, I was wondering what half term meant. He said half term would be like the middle of semester. I believe the UK school year is broken down into terms, and there's a week-long holiday halfway through each term. Thank you, Dales. Lovely Heaven says, do you think the national lockdown is too late? Well, generally, the longer you wait to institute measures, the more the virus will have spread. So, too late just depends on what you think about, costs and benefits. So I would need to look at, in terms of, is it too late? Well, there's the benefit of delaying it is that people get longer without a lockdown. The cost is that you can end up with a lot more people getting sick. So, I would have to, the public health experts I've seen pretty much all say, if there's a need for lockdown measures, sooner than later, because if you wait, that'll end up making things a lot worse, and you might have to have a longer lockdown because the virus will have spread to so many more people. So, but I don't know all the specific numbers from there, but generally speaking, when I hear public health experts talk, they say if you're going to have to do lockdown measures, you're better off doing them sooner, because then you're starting from a much lower level of virus spread. Dellis says, the writing was on the wall. I knew this would happen a week ago when the new strain started to take hold. It's almost like we're back to March in a way. We've got 6 weeks of lockdown in front of us, but the vaccine rollout provides some hope.
Like everybody should have been seeing that. Oh, we got a new strain. Oh, there go the lockdowns coming back. I mean, who can't see that?
Willow says, are the hospitals actually overflowing? Oh, the hospital situation is very bad in a lot of the UK. We've been reading you, in my coverage, I've read you a number of articles talking about specifics in different hospitals.
All right, this is going to be kind of weird because I'm making up most of the fabric for her clothing right now because it's not visible in the photograph. So we'll just do this off of memory of painting dozens of other paintings with people wearing clothes.
I know we've read a number of articles during our coverage, but let me do this here. If I can find you an example of one. Yeah, we read some yesterday too. You know, we read articles about people.
We read.
About so in like
We
the
read
UK, in
articles.
certain parts of the UK, you have
Weeks ago.
ambulances holding their patients for hours because there's no space at the hospitals to admit them.
Y'all heard
And
those
also,
stories? And just treating people outside the
people
hospital in
getting
the
huge
ambulance
delays when they call
because they
for an
couldn't get
ambulance on
in the
British-
actual building itself. Like, all right, we just
911
people gotta come outside and treat you in the
because
ambulance.
The ambulances are taken up with COVID patients. So here's an example. Soaring number of patients left waiting outside hospitals and ambulances. Some patients are so unwell that hospital staff begin their treatment in the ambulance.
Told you, motherfucker, just treating them in the ambulance.
The number of patients left waiting outside hospital and ambulances is soaring due to COVID infection, control measures, and rising hospital admissions. With paramedics warning, the number of patients left waiting outside hospitals and ambulances is soaring due to COVID infection control measures and rising hospital admissions, with paramedics warning that emergency calls are going unanswered. Patients waiting more than an hour to be handed to hospitals in England more than doubled in 2 weeks.
Their system's so backed up and all the ambulances are so busy that you call 911 for an ambulance and the line is busy.
Some patients are so unwell.
What did they say? Nobody answered. Yo, if that's not fucking scary,
because they don't have any
if that shit ain't if that shit ain't
this
scary,
is having a knock-on effect for patients.
how you call for life emergency assistance and the line is
Colleagues have told me in some cases there have been hundreds of emergency calls waiting
for 12 hours, 24 hours. Oh my god, yo. Yo, if that shit ain't fucking scary. You call for emergency assistance and the line is busy. Wow.
The chief of the London ambulance service said he had heard anecdotal reports of ambulance crews arriving at call-outs a number of hours after they were made to find a patient had deteriorated, adding, patients really aren't receiving the response they should. People are suffering because ambulances aren't getting them on time. That's the reality.
Alright, so like I say, guys, just for the next couple of days, just keep checking like whatever news you feel, you know, secure watching, and just to see, because this thing is, you know, it's not going anywhere, and if the UK is scared and they're going back into lockdowns, other countries are going to slowly do the same thing, and so there is a good chance that here in the States,
find a bunch of articles about the hospital situation.
We'll be right back in the same situation that, you know, like my office closed down over this shit, yo, because we have a facility where we get people off the street and come into our building and we offer classes and stuff like.
London Hospital.
I mean, once again, this shit is directly affecting, and we're like, how do we get back to normal? And my job is weird as shit right now.
King's College postpones operations amid shortage of ICU beds. One of the NHS's biggest hospitals has had to cancel urgent cancer surgery.
It's like, yeah, what are you gonna do?
Because so many of its intensive care beds are occupied by COVID-19 patients. King College Hospital in South London called off all priority 2 cancer operations it was due to perform Monday and Tuesday. They are procedures that cancer specialists have judged to be urgent and need to be done within 28 days of the decision to undertake them. The postponement has
But at the same time, people are taking super advantage of this pandemic shit and making money off gloves, masks, and other kind of shit. We just got to figure out a way to be a little more creative and fucking think in a pandemic mind state. Like, what can we, services or products can people use right now? That's, yo, that grocery delivery shit is fucking essential as shit, yo. Cause like they say, some people can't leave their house for no reason, yo.
Today. Canceling urgent cancer surgery.
What? Urgent cancer surgery?
Care beds occupied by COVID patients.
Whoa. I know you're dying from cancer. We were gonna operate and get that breast thing out of there, but we gotta wait because we just got 2 new COVID patients in, and they took the last 2 beds. Doctors are busy.
Says those that's awful. Those poor people suffering with cancer. So, you know, if when you have the health system resource being taken so much with people
I guess
COVID, and
They're gonna take a little break from right here.
You have so many people going to the hospital.
Like I just wish I could see more of it, but it is what it is.
For people who have COVID, it also
It'll come out
affects
nice
the care
still.
for lots of other people who just need
But
hospital care.
we need to run to the store, run a little errand real quick,
for the lockdowns is because you
and we probably just kind of chill and relax the rest of the day.
Linda says too bad if you have a heart attack. Yeah, I mean, you
Like
read
her
about the
bow.
ambulance
Yo, I was
delays,
thinking the
this is
same
what
thing,
happened.
Her bow, this bow
Alexia
is the
said
same
that's
color
awful,
that her
especially
thing
having to postpone
is.
virtual
And that's
surgery.
grandma hat to go with the outfit. She just
Yeah,
snatched
but
it and took it for the picture.
Her hat is just a little bit more bright than this. This is more like pastel.
But I just think, like, as soon as I start filling it in, I'm like, damn, when I touch this, like, these are almost the same fucking shades. Like, I'm gonna have to, like, I don't know.
I mean, it looks good though, what
It-
you have, and it'll probably make it pop a little bit more, so it they don't blend straight in together.
Yeah.
But it's definitely the same color. Like that headband is the color of grandma's shirt.
Oh, hold on, I just want to show you this. Ontario
Well, that's
has
good. Like
3
she
more
said, man,
cases
I
of
think she may
contagious
like
new
that
strain
with
of
both of them
COVID
wearing the
first
same
discovered
color.
in the UK.
Yeah, of course.
Cases are either linked to travel or to someone who's traveled. Province now has 6
Yeah.
more
I mean,
cases,
clearly
while
they
there's 1
they
case
see
in each
pink
of British
girls. Grandma
Columbia,
likes
Alberta,
pink,
and Quebec.
and the granddaughters like pink too. So.
Well, let's see, I'm gonna take a little break right now, guys.
So we are covering this
run an errand,
new
and
lockdown. We saw the
I'll probably
announcement
stream some
from
video games for a little while. I haven't
Minister,
done that in a minute.
Boris Johnson.
Not sure what
New
I'll
national
stream.
lockdown for England. He just announced it.
Go ahead,
National.
okay.
The first one, I believe, since March.
But
Where it applies
it's
to
the
entire
first of the
country.
month. Wake up, wake up, wake
Must
up.
stay at home
Get your
apart from
free
5
video
exceptions.
games and come on, get up,
And
get up.
also,
But
all primary
everybody knows
special
that if you
ministers
have
follow
PlayStation Plus, the annual subscription, that every month they give you free games. So I haven't checked what games are free this month, and it's already the 3rd. So I definitely have some free games up there. I'm gonna see if I can download whatever of those. I re-downloaded Elder Scrolls Online. I don't know why. I just saw the preview of whatever the latest update they have for it, or the latest DLC, and it's like, damn, that shit looks cool as shit. I was like, let me play that shit, yo. And so I downloaded it back on the PlayStation a couple days ago, and ain't touched that bitch yet, yo. But I don't know. I might play that, or see what new game they got, or just play some Call of Duty for an hour or something, or see what patches they put on Cyberpunk. They keep saying they keep patching it and patching it. But like always, I appreciate y'all guys keeping us company in the studio, checking out the progress on the portraits. Currently working on a commission painting right here, so for the next couple days I'll be trying to do more painting than talking. But it's coming along pretty good so far, and I'll catch you guys downstairs in the living room. Peace.